Let's go.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm your host, David Horsager. Join me as I sit down with influential leaders from around the world to discuss why leaders and organizations fail, top tactics for high performance, and how you can become an even more trusted leader. Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. It's David Horsager, and I have a special guest today. She's 33-year veteran at Chick-fil-A. She helped develop culture and talent there. She is a 3-time best-selling author. She has become a friend. We share the title of experts in residence at High Point University, and so we get to cross paths there once in a while. I'm excited to have on the show. Thank you for being here, Dee Ann Turner.
David, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, this is a treat. Before we get into culture and talent and all the great work you did at Chick-fil-A, now you do in your own consulting firm, and what you've written about in your books, tell us a couple things we don't know or need to know about Dee Ann Turner.
Oh, there's so much that I spend time talking about from my long career. But I have a couple of other. In fact, I just came from speaking at a church. My first role in life was a pastor's wife, and a lot of people don't know that, but my husband, I used to say I was married to a pastor. Well, I'm still married to the same man. He's just not a full-time pastor anymore, but that's something that not many people know about me, that was a role that I had once in life, and it actually shaped a lot of who I am.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's jump in on that. It's something to, whether you're running a church or any kind of organization, shaping culture, shaping, teams. I want to jump in on this culture you developed. When I looked at the data not too long ago, the average per store revenue of a Chick-fil-A, so we're going to go back first and we're going to go into what you're doing now, but how you created that culture, the average per store revenue without working on Sundays and a whole lot of other things was almost double McDonald's or anywhere else. It's a fascinating story. But the way you build culture there, the way you run lines there, people with DMVs would love to have Chick-fil-A take over the line situation, but you have similar people to other places, and yet, it's my pleasure. By the way, we've had Horst Schulze on, of course, who is the founder of Ritz-Carlton, and he said he was in the room with the Cathys. When he said, "Well, we say my pleasure, and you won't want to do that. You want to do something else." But I think it was Truett Cathy who said, "No, that sounds good." But
Horst is exactly right. That is how it happened.
But maybe you can tell us a little bit about maybe that story and just a little bit how this culture became so strong.
Okay, well, that's a lot right there. Let's start with this culture piece. And in the words of Jim Collins, the hedgehog concept for Chick-fil-A is the operator agreement. It's that Truett chose when he expanded his business starting in 1967. He started in 1946, but he started expanding Chick-fil-A restaurants in 1967. And he decided right then that he didn't want managers that were paid a salary because he didn't think that they would be as bought in as somebody who had skin in the game. So he came up with an agreement that provided operators an opportunity to make a small investment into the business and then share in the profits of the business. And Truett's philosophy is that he couldn't be everywhere, so he wanted this operator to want to run that business just like Truett would as if he were there. And it was a genius concept because he didn't go after people who were franchising types, people who just wanted to buy a territory, develop it, hire managers to work there. He wanted to select individual franchisees that would be the on-site leadership. And he started in all shopping malls back in 1967. And so they used to call those Chick-fil-A operators or franchisees, those are interchangeable terms, the mayor of the mall. And that was the goal, be the mayor of the mall, grow the community, be the top employer in the mall, and be a place that people came because not only did they enjoy great food, but they enjoyed the great service and experiences that went with it. As the business expanded, those opportunities grew. Obviously, when we went out of malls and into freestanding locations, that provided more opportunity for those franchisees. It also required us, by the way, to select a different kind of leader. because it's much more complicated business at that point. So it changed what we were doing from a franchisee selection standpoint. But they're the secret sauce in Chick-fil-A, those individual franchisees that have been so carefully selected. You might have read that, and I can't quote numbers today because I haven't been at Chick-fil-A for a few years, but when I was there, we were receiving, around 70 to 80,000 inquiries a year for only 115, 120 opportunities a year. And there are lots of people that wanted to be a Chick-fil-A franchisee. So the competition to be one is fierce. They're very carefully selected. My question when I was selecting franchisees is I would ask myself, would I want one of my 3 sons to work for this person? That was my final question. And sometimes I even asked the candidate, oftentimes I did, why would I want my 3 sons to work for you? And so that's the kind of culture that Truett built there.
I think that hiring was, you had this aligned growth. I'm part owner if I'm an operator. So that alignment was great. Tell me a little bit more about that hiring process. It's so hard to get that right for many people. And in your case, selection process, that selection of the operator, that like you said, you've got all these people. So that helps that want one. It's great. But it wasn't always that way. How did you select great from this pool? What are a few parts of why you are so good at selecting the right talent?
Well, thanks for mentioning selection because it starts with that mindset. I like to say that I never hire people, but instead I select talent. And that's certainly what we did at Chick-fil-A was to select talent. And there's a world of difference when you're looking at talent. You're looking at quality. Do you have the person with the right skills versus quantity? Do you have enough people? So as that selection process, it began, and it was different over time. One of my first territories as an operator recruiter early in my career at Chick-fil-A was the Northeast, where they couldn't even correctly say Chick-fil-A. Often they said Chick-fil-A or Chick-fil-A, and it was as much a marketing job as introducing people to the organization. And then you're going to try to get them to go and run this small business at the time that they, of this place that they'd never heard of. So early on, it was really introducing the brand and the great product to people, and then looking for people who would be just that. They would be on-site leadership. That didn't mean literally frying chicken and waffle fries, but it meant being there and supporting their team and working on the business instead of at the business. So, being that community spokesperson, having the right marketing strategy in place, having all the controllables under control, and really being a leader of the people of the business and growing leaders beneath them. As time went on and bigger opportunities came available for Chick-fil-A operators, part of that selection process was how many leaders did they grow up underneath them before they were able to move on to something else. But just real quickly, strong interviewing process. Really the ace in the hole to me for Chick-fil-A, at least at the time I was there. I don't know the process today, but at the time, for decades, we did really strong referencing of our candidates. So not just the interviews, but really talking to other people that they've been accountable to and hearing from other people that we had the right leader that was going to be a strong influence, that had a heart for service, that was purpose driven, that focused on teamwork. Those are some of the things that we looked at in the way we went about it. The other thing is we really wanted to make sure they knew what they were getting into. And so they went, if they had no restaurant experience, they would go and work in the restaurant. Mind you, at the time that I was there, 2/3 of Chick-fil-A franchisees were one-time team members. So a lot of them had that experience, but a third of them didn't have that experience. And that's okay. Truett used to say you can teach anybody to make a chicken sandwich. It's all the other leadership skills that we're looking for. But they would go in and make sure they knew, hey, you're going to come home smelling like peanut oil and all those other things that you get involved in the restaurant. So
you got the leaders. There's a selection process, a big bias for referencing, which makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people are having difficulty with hiring today. And first and foremost, they don't have a funnel for grabbing that many people to go from. It sure helps if you have 1,000, you only need 10 from that 1,000, But once you've got them, you've developed leaders. How are you developing those leaders? How are you equipping them? How are you building this culture? You've got your people selected across, distributed organization or even at HQ. What's the process for in a systematic way building this high trust culture?
So at the time that I was there, what I'll share with you is that, the franchisees are independent contractors. So they're developing their own leaders. Their brand standards around many things at Chick-fil-A, but when it came to selection of talent and the development of leaders, we really only had a few touch points that we were able to influence because of them being independent contractors. What we did, first of all, we believed that you had to select the right leader to start with. So again, going back to this franchisee selection, when we selected the best leaders there, then we felt like that they would have the capability, and that was part of what we interviewed on, was their experience of growing other leaders. From a Chick-fil-A standpoint, what my experience was in terms of leadership development, was a lot of exposure that I think is very unusual, starting very early career, a strong commitment to learning and development, so much so that, an entire function is resourced for that. And everyone, at least when I was there, everyone at the support center, it was what Chick-fil-A calls it, had an individual development plan, and they had a budget associated with it, and they were expected to use it, and how they used it was really up to the supervisor. So it might be skills-based. It might be a performance issue that needs to be addressed and they're getting skills-based. It might be a personal issue. Maybe the biggest need they have that year is they're having physical issues and they want to focus on their physical health. So they're going to get a personal trainer and they're going to use that money for that, just as an example. Or they're going to join a weight reduction group because that's what's good for them, or they're going to invest in stress reduction in some way. So it's not just about, the on-the-job skills, but it's about developing the whole person. So that is the first way they start. And then, there's constant opportunities to reskill and to update those skills throughout the training function that Chick-fil-A offers. So there's a big focus on in-house training, but then there's external opportunities too. They offer some of the best executive education opportunities in the world. They fund everything from the next great book you want to read to whatever course it is that you need to attend to internally or externally to increase your leadership ability. But I think some of the practices that are most effective there, at least when I was there, mentoring is a big commitment there. Every leader there has at least one mentee, and most of them have several formal mentoring relationships, not to mention a culture of informal mentoring.
Okay, we got to stop there.
Sure.
How do you do that? People are asking me all the time about that. Mentoring. I talk about it in my last book a little bit, but both the formal and how do you actually say you create a culture of informal? Because we say, people talk a lot about mentoring, but they haven't created a space for it, created a way of doing it, created what that even looks like. Tell me a little bit more about what does that look like? What was the formal mentoring? What does that look like? And then informal.
The formal mentoring program was part of so we had a 9-box process for identifying future leaders, leadership capability, and performance. And there were associated development opportunities depending on where you were in that 9-box. And so those believed to be future leaders would be put into a mentoring program with somebody senior to them. And so, for instance, highest level of leadership in the organization would be the executive committee, and they would have vice presidents that would be assigned to them. And you can trickle that on down throughout the organization. That started when, as we got into this, we realized we had to pass the culture down. And that became a big part of the mentoring process, was just being sure we were growing so fast that we were able to communicate that culture throughout. So those are assigned responsibilities. It's at least when I was there, it was quite an honor to be selected for that kind of mentoring. One of the things that I think made it work the best is and I write a little bit about this in my book, Crush Your Career, but I think that the mentee was tasked with the agenda. And so that, they set the agenda. They were responsible for the schedule, not the other way around. And I think that becomes much more effective because then the mentee is getting what they need. Not that the mentor wouldn't. I think one of the ways the mentor was able to inject was and one of the things that's most successful is when that they would bring that mentee along and let them be a part of things that they otherwise would have never seen. And give you an example, for 2 years, I was mentored by our Chief Marketing Officer, Steve Robinson, the original Chief Marketing Officer at Chick-fil-A. And Steve, he took me to the Richards group that created the famous cows. And I sat in on the marketing strategy meetings, for instance, or to be with him when he's meeting about Chick-fil-A's participation in the Chick-fil-A Bowl and things like that. Things that in the HR world I wasn't normally exposed to. That's just one of literally thousands of examples of exposure that people get. So formally, that's the way that worked. What I mean by informally, sometimes formally is not the best click. You might learn some things about the business, but sometimes on the personal level, it might not be the best click for someone. So you've got to find mentors inside or outside the organization. Informal mentoring works really well at Chick-fil-A because one of the original core values was generosity that included generosity of time. So there's an expectation that you're going to give to others of your time and your talent as well as treasure when we think of generosity. So that has a lot to do with why there's so much informal mentoring and willing to invest in people is that core value of generosity. And when you have a culture that's open and leaders that the culture is even, the head of the company, Truett Cathy, you could walk right into his office and ask him something. And when you have that kind of culture, everyone follows along on those same lines. And so it's very open door. It's all on a first name basis. That's not a big deal anymore. Everybody's on a first name basis. But when I started out, that was a little unusual. And so you have that, Truett always went by Truett. He was never Mr. Cathy, and he was the founder of the company. And that created a culture where people were very open to sharing and giving to one another. One final thing on mentoring that I think is also successful is reverse mentoring. And especially in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, when organizations are trying to improve in those areas, that's crucial that you have some people really help leaders understand these issues. And the best way to do it is to put them in a relationship where they can share both ways.
We understand the frustration of overspending on training programs without seeing long-term culture change and measurable results. From decades of working with top brands and organizations, we have seen that building a high-performing, high-trust culture is the only way to create a lasting impact. High-trust leaders make the difference between a flavor of the month training initiative and measurable learning and development. Our community of TrustEdge certified partners is equipped with a suite of tools to build a high-performing, high-trust culture where people can perform at their best. So if you want to start solving the root issue in your organization and produce lasting results, head to trustedgeplatform.com to learn more. And now, back to the show.
Let's jump in on one of your books I want to hit on especially. There's 3 great ones at least, but on the Bet on Talent, how to create a remarkable culture and win the hearts of customers. I want to drill down just, a lot of listeners here. We've got CEOs and senior leaders and managers and whether they're trying to create a culture in an organization, a nonprofit, a global government, everything has a culture. How are we creating, what are some steps to create a remarkable culture where people can perform at their best? We talk a lot about trust, building trust, and how do we do that? But what would be a couple things we could take away and say, I want a higher performing culture that is, in your words, remarkable. What are a couple things I should think about right now as the culture keeper?
So there are 3 things. Unfortunately, people think culture is 1,000 things, and they're trying to create, whether it's Friday afternoon happy hours or some kind of big team event, or let's have your favorite college football day or whatever. And all those are important parts of culture. But here's the core of the culture. It's 3 things. First, you want to have a meaningful purpose, the reason you exist at all. Define your reason for being. It's your why, and your why never changes. The second thing is a challenging mission. It's the big goal you're going to rally your organization around. And I use a mission such as when Kennedy said to NASA and the U.S. that we would put a man on the moon back in 1961. He said, but we'll put a man on the moon before the end of the decade and bring him safely back to Earth. What a big mission. People rallied around that.
So let's help with this. I want to get tactical here. I want to get to number 3. I can't wait. But How do so many businesses are similar? Like your consulting company, what's the big mission? What's the big goal?
Well, the big goal is, it's funny that you say that, because I'm
or
in
help
the
me
midst
with mine.
I'm actually in transition, because the next thing out of my mouth is, and when you achieve a mission, then you actually set a new mission for your organization. Sure. Now, my organization is kind of small, very small. So I'm actually in transition of going for that. And I don't normally say revenue goals are part of a mission. It can be. I mean, at one time, Chick-fil-A was pursuing a mission of reaching $1 billion in sales. That was a big thing. But for me, starting out and being 3 years into it, that was what my mission was about. Now I have a greater purpose of inspiring others to live out their calling. That is my purpose. But my mission is in transition, because I'm going through, okay, I needed some revenue goals to keep this thing afloat. I've met those. What am I going to be about next?
What would you say, what have been some good ones you hear? Because you can have a mission. In some cases, people's mission sounds a lot like their purpose. Like we would say our mission is to develop trusted leaders and organizations around the world. But that mission is unchanging. It's our purpose. We are here to create trusted leaders and organizations around the world. We believe we serve people best when we do that. But this mission, this big goal right now, you could say a number. You could say, I also think sometimes it's not gritty enough. Like we want to touch 100 million people with trust, but how do you defining that? We've learned that we touch so many people we can't even count. It kind of can get, you can't see that vision, you could say. What are some examples, or what are some commonalities of a great mission?
Well, I think commonalities, first of all, is a SMART goal. So, something that you actually can measure, and something that is time bound, so that you know when you've achieved it and you can celebrate it. And I think all of those that was actually the next thing out of my mouth when you, as we began talking about this mission and asking me of great examples. One of the ones that I love that we had at Chick-fil-A, we had a mission that was to be America's best quick service restaurant at satisfying every customer. That was so, lots of data. I mean, it was easy to measure, but it was like, okay, satisfying. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm just not motivated by the word to satisfy. It's like, I want to do something beyond satisfy. But anyway, when we achieved that, when Chick-fil-A became number one at customer service in the country, the next mission became something, and I love this mission statement. It's not as gritty as you might think it needs to be, but I love it because it's so memorable. And it was simply this: be remarkable. And with the remark italicized, because it meant be the organization that people remark about, that they talk about how great your products are, your service is, and your experiences are. And that became such a long-term mission, because it started with a focus on, okay, do we need to go back and make sure that we're meeting all the standards on a Chick-fil-A sandwich? And we did that. Operational excellence. We focused on, is that breast of chicken sitting exactly on that toasted butter bun like it's supposed to be, and those 2 pickle slices placed exactly like they're supposed to be, and everything about operational excellence on every recipe, everything. We focused on that. And then we went to service, and we talked about, it started with this idea of these brand standards around service. But then when it got turned over to the franchisees, they knocked it out of the park, David. They took it all to the next level. Their team members took some brand standards and they turned it into this remarkable service that people were talking about everywhere. They were talking about, this team member changed my flat tire, jumped off a dead battery, went dumpster diving for discarded dental appliances, jumped out of the drive-through window into the back seat of a car to save a child that was choking. These are the kinds of things that they were doing, and they named it second mile service, meaning going above and beyond.
How did you do that better than others? Like I remember with the former, I think the only at the time billionaire, you might have known him too, Soderquist, when we got to chat together and meet at his home, and it was a privilege for me. But I remember asking him, how do you drive the culture at Walmart? And he said it was Sunday morning, or I think it was Sunday morning or Saturday morning, 7 a.m. meetings where they basically did in what in academics is called appreciative inquiry. Talked about the best of. Here's the best of. Here's the best of. And it caught on. Like everybody started doing and being more the best of, right? But how did you do it there? Because, any other organization, any other fast food restaurant has this opportunity. And yet it seems like the story is shared more. My pleasure is shared more consistently. These types of things are more amplified. What is it that Chick-fil-A did that created that drive to do that, to be better, to really serve people so well?
So I believe some things. I think, first of all, because they're privately owned and they're family owned and privately held. I think that is a big reason because you have that influence. They're now in third generation leadership that's been passed down from generation to generation with this focus on we're here to serve. It is the number. We didn't get to core values, by the way, but the core values.
That's coming. Yeah, number 3. So share that in that.
Yeah.
So number 1. So on. Let's get this back to come back in. I went off the rails. That's happened before, but we're talking about what really does it take to create an amazing culture. I was just bringing it back in. In essence, my question was, how do you actually cascade that? So that really plays well to number 3. So what have we said so far? A meaningful purpose or why, a challenging mission or big goal. That one we can change once we've accomplished it. And number 3
is demonstrated core values. Of course, you notice I said demonstrated because you can have a list on the wall or on the screensaver, but if they're not being demonstrated from the top down, then they're not really effective. And that's what I witnessed at Chick-fil-A. Our original core values were words that described who Truett Cathy was. It was what he lived out. By the way, he didn't write all this down early in Chick-fil-A's existence. All this didn't get written down until the 1980s, and he'd been in business since 1946. But what was written down was what he had demonstrated. And so at the time, the core values were loyalty, generosity, excellence, and integrity. And later, those transformed a little bit to be reflective of a number of things that happened. Truett passed away. His son Dan became the CEO. Chick-fil-A got a new executive committee, a new board of directors, and a whole new generation of Chick-fil-A employees. And it was time to look at this. Again, core values can change for the right reason at the right time too. And those same words still applied to who Chick-fil-A was, is, and wanted to be. But their core values changed to a new set, which were, we're here to serve, we're better together, we're purpose-driven, and we pursue what's next. And so that serve piece, you asked me the difference between Chick-fil-A and others, and it's about this relentless commitment to service. And it starts at the top of the organization. It started with Truett. And by the way, in their organization, and again, at least when I was there, my experience was the higher, quote unquote, you were in leadership in the organization, the more you were expected to serve. And the person that we were serving most was the franchisee, because nothing happened till somebody sold chicken. And the franchisee, their role was to serve the customer and their team member. The team member is the vital role. They're the ones standing across the counter with the customer with the $10 bill. So this whole relentless focus on service. And I really credit Dee Ann Turner with bringing that to a new level. He was the one who identified this need. And it basically came from, hey, people can copy our products. Let's differentiate ourselves in this area of service. And then it became, let's go above and beyond anything a customer would expect. And so there became a principle within the organization, and the expectation was that every customer on every visit will experience some element of second mile service. At first, the support center tried to dictate what that was, but then we realized that wasn't going to work. And we turned it over to the franchisee and said, hey, by the way, you know your customers. You figure out what that looks like in your community. Here's some brand standards. We'd like you to do these basic things, but the above and beyond, you define what it is. And they defined that so well for their team members. They empowered them to do all these remarkable things that you hear about in the news. And it came from those individuals, franchisees, from the example that was set from Truett and his family and the leaders from there down.
So that's a great, I just want to put an exclamation point here on these 3 keys to culture, and you can find a whole lot more about those in Bet on Talent and your other books. But let's just jump to the talent side. Okay, there's a lot out there of how we recruit and retain talent. I wouldn't mind talking about that. But how do I be great talent? It's a little bit about what you talk about in acing the interview, but what if I'm going to be the right person, what's that look like?
Oh, well, I think it's, first of all, culture that matches the organization. So I want my culture to match the organization. It might not be the exact same words, and I don't think it should be, but it's aligned with the culture. And then secondly, I want competency that matches the role. But I want to look at this organization, what's its trajectory and what their vision and strategy is. And do I meet what their future needs are? Is that a place I'm going to be able to grow? And so understanding my competencies and being able to communicate that helps make me great talent. And then lastly, it's chemistry that matches the team. And when I'm looking for great talent in the area of chemistry, it's not just, it's not locking arms and singing Kumbaya and everybody that gets along. What I'm looking for is somebody who can bring their diverse point of view into the room. They can sit around the table. They can communicate that so well and collaborate so well that they influence others in the room. That to me is perfect chemistry. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for talent, is culture that matches the organization, competency that matches the role, and chemistry that matches the team. And if I'm talent, that's what I'm trying to be.
I love it. What are you learning these days? Tell us a bit about what you're up to and what are you learning right now?
I am in huge transition. I've been in book deadlines for the last 7 years, and I didn't have one in 2022. So that was kind of weird for me, scary, because it was a lot of what was driving me through these years. But I'm kind of in transition about, okay, what is my next impact? Because I don't have a book on the horizon right now. We'll see what happens. But right now, I feel like I've said a lot of words in the 3 books that I've written. And I'm one of those, say what you have to say, but don't keep writing it over and over for people. So I haven't decided what that is next, but big transition. But I'm spending a lot of time speaking. And of course, the big thing is because of the release of Crush Your Career, I'm enjoying investing in young people. And hopefully the future that they represent, and that they're prepared for that. And so anything I can do to help them with that is a big part of who I am, not just like my role with High Point, but also I have 3 sons that are in that category as well. And so I spend time coaching my own kids, career-wise, and helping them. And that's a lot of what my focus is right now.
How are you yourself staying fresh and relevant and capable there's people that are reaching out to you for advice and in leadership. So how do you stay fresh? How are you staying a learning human?
Yeah, I think that the engagement that I have with other organizations is actually really important. I would tell you I probably learned more in the last 4 years than a lot of my time at Chick-fil-A, because when you're focused so much on your role within an organization and leading your team and doing things the way your organization does it is somewhat insulated. But to spend time with hundreds of clients who are doing things very differently, sometimes than what I'm accustomed to, that keeps things really fresh. And again, I go back to this thing of being with the young people. I mean, when I go to High Point for my role, they're like, okay, who am I having dinner with? Which students am I having dinner with? Because I learn so much from them. And especially in areas that I need to, whether it's technology or, what's the latest, greatest podcast I need to listen to. But that's a big part, is learning from those young people, not just the other leaders that are out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we get sharpened every time we're part of that. And, love that. Love what they're doing there is pretty amazing as far as bringing people together. I'm on the board of another university, Bethel University. They're doing some great things too in equipping people. And I just love what Highs Point's doing as far as really experiential, connecting, sharpening each other. We get sharpened every time we get to be around those amazing. In my case, it's MBAs and business school students generally as far as the school that I'm out of. But anyway, I love that. Hey, one thing I've learned about great leaders, and well, I should just say it this way. One thing I've seen, at least, is they tend to have habits, personal habits, that help them be better at work. So, like, I know they keep healthy physically, mentally, spiritually. They're doing things that are, they're intentional about their life away from work, and it makes them better at work. What are some of the habits you've had over the years that have helped you be even a better leader on a daily basis in this role that is, can be really taxing?
Well, I say this a lot, but it was the game changer for me. And it's when I started spending the first hour now it's a longer period of time, but when I was younger in my career, I spent the first hour of the day on me. And it was my time for spiritual growth. It was time for exercise. It was a few minutes to read, and just center myself for the day. And one of the things I loved about retiring from corporate life is I got to expand that time. I was always like, oh, my quiet time's over. My exercise time is over. So I really love that I have a little bit more time on that. To the younger people, it was hard. When I had 3 children at home that I had to get out the door every morning and a husband that also worked, it was hard. It meant I got up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock most days to have that hour, but it made the difference in me as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Little things make the biggest difference, right?
Yeah.
Little things done consistently make the big difference. So, well, there's a whole lot more we could cover and a whole lot more we could talk about. This has been so great. I'm going to put in the show notes, everybody knows, trustedleadershow.com, all the places they can find you, find out about you, all the work you're doing from consulting, writing, books, connection. What's your favorite place if people could remember while they're listening? If they're driving in the car right now, what's your favorite place for people to go find out about what you're up to?
Oh, just go to my website, deeannturner.com, DEEANN Turner.com, and it'll have you can connect to my books, my podcast, all of my social media handles, blog post, everything's there.
DeeAnnTurner.com. Well, this has been a treat. We always end with one final question. It is the Trusted Leader Show. Dee Ann, who is a leader you trust and why?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that, so I've given it a lot of thought, and I get asked a similar question often. Who's your favorite leader? All those things. And I struggle with it because no matter who I say, somebody listening to this, this is a reason that person isn't it. So I thought about just 2 people that have really helped me since I started my own business. And the thing about them is their abundance mentality. To go from what I did at Chick-fil-A and to have that platform, jump off, do my own thing, launch, 3 books, podcast, e-course, all of those things. And there were 2 guys that are really well known and just were willing to give them themselves. There's actually 3 that have an abundancy mentality, to give time to me. One is Pat Lencioni. So wrote the foreword to 2 of my books, just supported me. Anything I ever asked a question about, he just made himself available to me. And that abundancy mentality just really shined through. Another one is Carrie Newhoff. Carrie did the same thing. I was starting out on my own, compared notes, just supported me in any way that he could. And I was really grateful for that. And the other person that's done that for me is Nito Cobain. Same thing. All 3 of them have the same thing in common, abundance and mentality. How can I help you? How can I add value to you? And I've just been really, really grateful for all 3 of those men in this season that have helped me in that way.
Well, there's lots more we could talk about, lots more here. Everybody can find about Dee Ann Turner in the show notes. Thank you for being here, Dee Ann. Thank you for being our friend, my friend. Thank you for the great work you're doing in the world. For now, this has been the Trusted Leader Show. Until next time, stay trusted.